Puritans believe they have a contract with God. If they are good, if they are moral, if they work hard, pray, and establish a model for the rest of the world, God will reward them. But if they start to backslide, God will punish them worse than if they were heretics. And this is a quote from John Winthrop. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. So that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world. So this is their anxiety. This is their perspective on who they are and their place in the world. And it leads to a huge amount of soul searching. If there are any problems or disaster befalls the colony, it leads to a lot of soul searching and determining of how they are at fault for their own calamity. Think about if there's a major storm, if they are attacked, if there is a tornado, if there is an eclipse. These are all signs from God, and it leads to a sense of, am I doing the right thing? Is our society doing the right thing? If someone falls sick, right, then that's a punishment from God. It's a huge amount of anxiety. They're very insecure, and they try to rid themselves of the devil's influence in the form of witches, sinners, or Quakers. So these are all things sent by God to test them. They spend a lot of time hearing these lessons, these sermons, often twice a week, twice a day, each a couple hours long. So the average New Englander listens to about 7,000 sermons in his lifetime. That's 14,000 hours, which is 583 days, or just over a year and a half of listening to sermons straight. That's a lot of time, and this is a major form of entertainment. This is it, right? There's no TV, there's no phone, there's no internet. They also spend a lot of time trying to rid themselves of sinners, right? So anytime they find someone who's a sinner, that's the time to get rid of them. So, for instance, in New Haven, magistrates accused George Spencer of having sex with a pig because the pig bore a piglet that looked a lot like Spencer. So they hanged both Spencer and the pig in 1642. New Haven also convicted and hanged Thomas Hogg for having sex with a pig. I don't know whether or not his name was Hogg, and that's what convinced them that he had sex with a pig, or whether he actually did. These were bad things to get rid of, but neither of them were as bad as witches. So witches were women mostly. Occasionally there was men, but there was a sense that women were much more susceptible to being witches, because witches were humans that Satan had recruited to sign their name in his book of blood. And there's a sexual component to this that was a little bit more obvious in Europe witchcraft accusations than in America. But the idea was the devil recruited women to sign their name in his book so that he would gain power to harm and kill in exchange for their souls, so that they would have the sort of the power of the devil, and he would have their souls. So whenever a cow or human got sick and died, Puritans looked for the witch, right? They looked for the human agent of the devil. So for the safety of the Puritan community, they believed that witches had to be identified and neutralized. And they saw them as women, especially women who acted out in some odd way. They gossiped too much, they had too much independence, they made too much money through work. So 80% of the people who were accused were witches. Before 1692, which is the Salem witch trials, there were actually 93 women who were accused and convicted of witchcraft. It's very hard to hang them. It's only about a handful were hanged because of this. Now, the Puritans not only saw the sort of threats from within, right? Witches were threats from within the community. They also saw threats from outside the community, especially Native Americans. They saw the wilderness and Native Americans as themselves evil, as sort of the dominions of Satan, because they were clearly not Christian, so they had to be either converted or destroyed. They also worried that the wilderness is itself. So they worry that the wilderness is seductive, is going to pull the people away from Puritanism, so they must resist that Native American wilderness and turn it into something civilized, right? So they're consciously cultivating and civilizing the landscape. And this is one of the reasons why we have these stone walls. They're turning this sort of untamed wilderness into something that's very straight lines, square corners, very clearly an aspect of civilization. They're dividing their property. They're creating visible lines. It's a very they're trying to turn it into a very English countryside, as well as build real fences that protects their crops. They bring their own livestock. They bring their own cows, their chickens, their pigs. They burn the forests. They kill wild animals, creating a separation between them and Native Americans, between their way of life and Native American life. And so this is the English customs become very different than the Native American customs. Native Americans don't sort of garden the way that the way English do. English tend to do straight lines. They tend to fence off the gardens. Native Americans don't. They let their crops grow together so that they can work together. It's a little bit more efficient that way. So the English, they fence in their crops and they let their animals run free, which then eat Native American crops, which leads to conflict. The English response is that Native Americans should fence crops like English do, but this leads to more conflicts because the Native Americans kill the animals that eat their crops, because they see animals as those that should be killed, not as pets. And the English want compensation for their dead animals. The Native Americans refuse because they don't believe anyone can own an animal. And this leads to some conflicts that eventually lead to war. Now, the Puritans believe they are entitled to that land. They don't see the Native Americans as entitled to the land because the Native Americans have not civilized that land. Only by civilizing, by improving the land, do you really own the land. And they believe that they had been chosen by God to improve this land. See this. This is Milford, Connecticut town meeting in 1640. They sit down and had their town meeting. They said, voted, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So everything on earth is God's, and all the products are God's. Voted that the earth is given to the saints. So God gave the land to the people who are saved, and voted, we are the saints. And the implication of this is God gave us this land. We are God's favorite. God gave this to us. We deserve this land. They do want to be orderly, and so they do offer to pay Native Americans for the land with goods, guns, metal objects, alcohol, wampum, which is a bead currency and a sign of friendship between English and Native Americans. But the Native Americans understand land very differently than Europeans. Right? Europeans believe they're paying Native Americans so that the Europeans can own the land, and the Native Americans believe the Europeans are paying them to allow them the rights to the land, to use the land, but then when they're done, to go away. So these two different perceptions of land lead to increasing conflicts, right? The Europeans don't like that the Native Americans hunt on quote-unquote European land, and the Native Americans don't like that settlers are cutting down trees and destroying the land that is good for hunting. So this conflicts come out of different conceptions of what is land and poor communication.